Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're continuing in the Zera Shimshon. We're in Parshat Vayakhel Oisches. We're going to learn a beautiful piece on the Zera Shimshon that focuses primarily on a Gemara in Brachas that quotes the conversation that Moshe Rabbeinu had with Betzalel when he instructed him to build a Mishkan. The Zera Shimshon begins Parak Tes de Brachas. Amr Reb Shmuel ben Nachmani, Amr Reb Yonasan, Betzalel al Shem Chachma Sinikra. Betzalel is called on the fact that he was a chacham. What was the chacham? So the Gemara says, "B'shasham lakadosh baruch hu Moshe lech emal leBetzalel ase mishkan orav v'kelim." Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, "Go and instruct Betzalel to build the mishkan first, followed by the Aron, followed by the kelim." So halach Moshe went and told Betzalel the opposite. Ase kelim, go ahead and make the kelim, Aron, and then the mishkan which Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to build first. Moshe Rabbeinu went and told Betzalel to build it last. So the Gemara continues. Omalai, so Betzalel said, Moshe Rabbeinu, minhaga shalaylam, the minig of the world is you first build a house, you have a place where you could store the furniture, the kalim, and then you buy the kalim. You don't build the kalim first. If you don't buy the kalim first if you have nowhere to put it. So Moshe Rabbeinu, like in a wonder, says to Betzalel, were you Betzel Kel? Were you in the company, in the shadow, when Hashem told me? You're taka right. Hashem told me, first build the Mishkan, and then the Kalim, then the Aron. So the Zera Shimshon says, this whole Gemara, this whole conversation really makes no sense. From Aleph to Taf, there's a lot of problems, says the Zera Shimshon. For example, he says, I don't understand. Tzarchian, Lama Moshe Hipech Haseder. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu change the order that what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him to build? Secondly, what was Betzalel arguing with Moshe Rabbeinu? As far as Betzalel understood, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, first build the Aron, then the Kalim, and then the Mishkan. Why would Betzalel say, no, that's not what Hashem said? How does he know what Hashem said? It doesn't make sense? Okay, you're right, but that's what Hashem told me to do. So why is Betzalel arguing with Moshe Rabbeinu? Or why is Betzalel questioning Moshe Rabbeinu? Right? When it came to building to making the begadim for the Kohanim, they had shatnez in it. No one said, how could you make the begadim if it had shatnez in it? You're right, but that's what Hashem wanted. Then the Zera Shimshon says the third question. Ma chochma hizu shel Betzalel? What chochma was this? Right? Betzalel himself said that everybody knows that you first build the house and then the kelim. So the reason that he was called Betzalel because he was a chacham, there wasn't such a reason to be a chacham. There must be something more here, says the Zera Shimshon, than this conversation back and forth, because something that was so Parshat, Hashem wouldn't have called Betzalel. So v'yesh loymar, so the Zera Shimshon says you're right. There's a much deeper inyan in the story between Betzalel and Moshe Rabbeinu. V'yesh loymar shemitzad echad hayinir shekedushas aron v'kelim gedolim v'kedushas hamishkan. On the one hand, you can make the argument, and you should say that the kedusha of the aron and the kelim were greater than the mishkan. Sher hamikdash v'hamishkan nechrav, the mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Now the Mishkan wasn't destroyed like the Beis HaMikdash, but it was taken apart and put away. And the Kalim, however, the Kalim of the Mishkan, the Aron, was never taken apart. It was hidden underneath the Beis HaMikdash. As we know, Shlomo HaMelech built tunnels, and Yoshio HaMelech gonzam. Yoshio HaMelech hid them. V'abayis nechrav, and the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed b'shvil lahatzel es Yisrael. So you see that the Kedusha, the fact that it was destroyed, must be that it had a lower level of Kedusha. So based on that, says the Zera Shimshon, we also know an idea of Malin B'Kodesh. We're always going up in Kodesh. So if we explained, according to this idea, that the Beis HaMikdash was a lower level Kedusha than the Kalim, so you first build the Mishkan, the Kedusha Kala, the lighter Kedusha, then you go up a step and you build the Aron and the Kalim. On the other hand, Amnon, says the Zera Shimshon, mitzad acher, on the other hand, gedol kedushas hamishkan ve'hamikdash, k'mo shemetzina b'noiv v'givon u'mishkan shiloi. That the Mishkan, on the other hand, was really a higher level of kedusha, was greater than the Kalim, because even though we had the Kalim in these places where there was no Mishkan, Hashem didn't rest the Shechina. So we see that Hashem only rests the Shechina when the Mishkan is built. So therefore, the Mishkan must be greater. And based on that idea, says the Zera Shimshon, we now have to introduce another concept. So now, just to recap, the Zera Shimshon said there's two sides of the coin. One side of the coin, the Kalim were a high level Kedusha, then the Mishkan. So therefore, the Mishkan is built first, then the Mishkan, then the Kalim. Why was the Mishkan a lower level? Because eventually it was destroyed. So based on that idea, you first build the Mishkan, then you build the Kalim. On the other hand, the Mishkan is a higher level of Kedusha, because when there was no Mishkan, there was no Shechina. So therefore, based on that idea, the Kalim is the lower level of Kedusha, so it goes first, followed by the Mishkan. V'inei Amr Chazal, the Masechta Soita. So now, the key nekuda here is, in order for us to understand this piece, is the fact that since the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan were destroyed, it has a lower level of Kedusha. Whatever Moshe and David built, it was never destroyed. Like the Megala Mukos brings down, that Moshe Rabbeinu would have went into Eretz Yisrael, and he would have built the Beis HaMikdash. The enemies of Klal Yisrael never would have been able to destroy it. Now, with this idea, we'll explain the teretz, a little bit of the teretz outside first to make it easier. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan was going to be destroyed. So therefore, it had a lower level of Kedusha, and the Kalim had a higher level of Kedusha. So based on that idea, the Mishkan, which is the lower level of Kedusha, is built first. Then you go up a level, and you build the Kalim. So that's why Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, first build the Mishkan, then the Aron and the Kalim. However, Moshe Rabbeinu was hoping that he would go to the base to Eretz Yisrael. The Moshe Shoyim Etzapa Lahachnes Yisrael Eretz. He also knew that if he built the Beis HaMikdash, it never would have been destroyed. So therefore, according to his cheshbon, what's a greater level of kedusha? The Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash, because it would never be destroyed. Remember, if Moshe Rabbeinu would have went into Eretz Yisrael, which was Moshe Rabbeinu at that point was thinking, because the Chet Egel, even there wasn't yet the Chet the Mei Meriva by the waters. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu at this point still was under the idea that he was going to Eretz Yisrael, and he would build a Beis HaMikdash and would never be destroyed. So if it would never be destroyed, at a much higher level of kedusha than the Kalim. So therefore, he told Bezalel, first build the Kalim, and then the Mishkan, because the Kalim were the lower level of Kedusha, then you go up a level to the Mishkan. Now, Bezalel knew this. Bezalel knew that Moshe Rabbeinu would not go into Eretz Yisrael. And this is, says the Zera Shimshon, the Nikud over here. So before we continue, let's just summarize. We have two ideas. Either the Beis HaMikdash was a higher level of Kedusha than the Kalim. So therefore, you first build the Kalim, then the Beis HaMikdash. Or the Kalim had a higher level of Kedusha, so first you build the Mishkan, then you build the Kalim. It's built on the idea if the Beis HaMikdash could be destroyed or not. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that the Beis HaMikdash would eventually be destroyed. So therefore, the Kalim were a higher level of Kedusha. So that's why Hashem said, first build the Mishkan, then the Kalim. Moshe Rabbeinu was under the idea that really he was going to build the Beis HaMikdash and would never be destroyed. So the Mishkan was the higher level of Kedusha. So first build the Kalim, then the Mishkan. However, Bezalel knew the secret that Moshe Rabbeinu would not go into Eretz Yisrael. But he didn't want to tell Moshe Rabbeinu, listen, Moshe Rabbeinu, you're not going to go into Eretz Yisrael. So it doesn't make sense to build the Kalim first. Because really the Mishkan is a lower level. Because the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash would be destroyed. But Bezalel couldn't tell that to Moshe Rabbeinu. He's going to be poigeh him. So he told him with Chachma something that everybody knows. So the Zera Shimshon says the Chachma was not what he told him, was rather what he did not tell him. He wanted to convey the message to Moshe Rabbeinu that really the Mishkan is a lower level of Kedusha. But he couldn't tell it to him, you know why it's a lower level of Kedusha? Because you're not going to go into Eretz Yisrael, because you're going to die. So the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash will be destroyed. So he told him a completely different reason. But he gave him a completely different answer. Who told you that the Mishkan is more chomer than the Kalim? And therefore, maybe, he said like an allusion of maybe, because really Bezalel really understood that Moshe Rabbeinu would not go into Eretz Yisrael, and therefore the Mishkan was a lower level of Kedusha. So Betzalel, in a roundabout way, said to Moshe Rabbeinu, really the meaning of the world is that you first build a house and then you buy the kelim. And probably, maybe that's what Hashem really told you. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, you're right. That is be'etzem what Hashem told me. Now, based on that, it's possible at that moment Moshe Rabbeinu began to realize that he wasn't going to go into Eretz Yisrael. And Memela, that's why later on, he understood that this was an issue that had to be resolved, which in a sense is hinted in the Parshat Shalach when Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, Shlach lecha anoshim, send for you anoshim, right? Because really, Moshe Rabbeinu at that point knew he probably was not going to go into Eretz Yisrael, and yet he still sent Malachim into Eretz Yisrael. But we see from here that the Zera Shimshon, how he really uncovers the depthness, the secret of what really happened, and really the chachma, the great chachma and sensitivity that Betzalel had. He was deserving of the name of Betzel Kel, that he was in the shadow of Hashem. That b'chachma he was able to hint to Moshe Rabbeinu without being poigei him, that the Mishkan really is a lower level of Kedusha, and that's why it's built first, followed by the Aron and the Kelim.